Rakib Ehsan is here. Rakib, nice to see you. How's it going?
No, it's going well. Thank you for having me.
Good, man. How are you describing yourself these days? I mean, you've got so many hats that you wear. I never know quite which one.
I've got my finger in a lot of pies.
You have, absolutely right.
Official title is Independent Research Consultant.
Excellent. We'll have that. Church in crisis as Welby is forced to quit, is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. As I said yesterday, I expected him to quit. I didn't quite expect him to quit as quickly as he has. But what an absolute mess. The church is left in turmoil. And like I say, I don't know anymore whether, as a former Archbishop of Canterbury, he's still allowed to sit in the House of Lords. I don't think he should. I don't know whether he's still part of the church. Is he a bishop still? I don't know.
No, well, one thing that's clear is the Church of England has been plunged into a major crisis.
Yeah.
It's a damning review into child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very clear that there's been a fundamental failure of leadership.
Yeah.
Here,
totally.
We've seen the Church of England intervene in all kinds of areas, whether it's immigration and asylum, racial inclusion in modern Britain. But really, the bread and butter is, you know, making sure that your house is in order.
Of course.
And if there are people who are involved in child sexual abuse, that is taken as seriously as it should be.
So last night, I was listening to Jeremy Kyle and both Kevin O'Sullivan as well on both their shows, also asking questions about whether the police are going to get involved now. I mean, it's a retrospective investigation, of course, because the guy in question is no longer alive. But clearly there is some kind of, you know, problem with what happened inside of the church and the reporting of it to the police. So will there be some kind of police investigation? Could there be charges brought against people? You know, there's so many questions to answer.
There's so many questions to answer. I think there's also questions to answer in terms of Justin Welby's position in the House of Lords. As well. I think that there's questions to be asked there.
Because the only reason he's in the House of Lords is because he's the Archbishop of Canterbury. So if he's no longer the Archbishop of Canterbury, why should he be allowed to go there?
No, absolutely. And I think there's also deeper questions to ask about the role of the Church of England in modern British society. I've talked a great deal about the decline in Christian devotion in modern Britain. And the reality is, if we want to reinvigorate that, it's exactly these kind of scandals that work against that.
And again, yesterday, we were listening to the various different debates on Talk, which were fascinating in a way. You know, one of the reasons why the bishops are in the House of Lords is that they were at one point thought to be the sort of moral conscience of
highly
the country,
respected in a society.
And the reason
large,
they were there because they were brought in, I think, probably from the days of somebody like Henry VIII, right? They were brought into Parliament to give the public a sort of sense that, you know, politicians can't run everything. We need to have this kind of Christian guidance from these guys.
A sort of moral presence, a healthy moral presence.
Yeah, a healthy moral presence. But, you know, really, do we need that now in 2024? I don't think so.
I think it's a real shame. I think that back in those days, I think you could see the justification for their position in the House of Lords. But it's scandals like this that many people will be asking for. They might even go as far as saying that there should be a disestablishment, which is something that I wouldn't want to see, because I actually
do you know, Piers Morgan put out a tweet yesterday which kind of encapsulated it for me. A picture of Welby putting the crown on King Charles's head. You know, this is a guy who was involved at the highest level of basically the coronation of the king. You know, he was the guy that was running it. He was the guy that was actually in charge of the ceremony. He was the guy, you know, there were all those weird, you know, strange things from the past, you know, like weird gloves and strange kind of sticks and all sorts of strange, you know, historical matters that they were partaking in, and suddenly Archbishop Welby was at the heart of it, putting the crown on King Charles's head. Now that guy, who was so key to the coronation of the king, is now out of a job.
Well, he was also heavily involved in Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's funeral as well. And I think that we have those images of him being involved in these high order ceremonies. And I think that another point that I make is that then Hugh Edwards, for example, at the BBC, announced the passing of the late Queen. So I think that you're seeing fundamental failures of leadership and figures who should be in positions that command high respect. It's working in the opposite direction.
By the way, just apropos of nothing at all, a friend of mine sent me a text last night to say, by the way, I'm watching the Food Network and they're currently playing Mary Berry's Christmas Party, and guess who was on it? Hugh Edwards.
Hugh Edwards.
We were going, what's going on? How is he still on television?
No, it's absolutely remarkable.
There'll be all these situations where suddenly Hugh Edwards pops up, and apparently there was all kinds of double entendres going on. People, my friend was going, this is unbelievable.
Well, these terrible revelations, what they've done, they've soured historic events in modern British history.
Well, you won't be able to play anything that's got Hugh Edwards' voice on it, will you?
Well,
and there was a debate. There was a debate about whether they should put AI over it or whether they should remake.
But it's quite remarkable that it's come to that, isn't it?
I know
that we're entertaining that possibility.
Right. But this is the problem. You know, we have got a major problem in this country with you know, some what you might call, you know, supposedly respectable figures doing things which have completely brought not only themselves but also their jobs into disrepute.
Well, it brings Britain into disrepute.
Yeah, totally.
We're talking about the Archbishop of Canterbury here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that this is obviously a problem for our own country, but in terms of our international reputation, it doesn't do us any favours at all.
No, it really doesn't. The other big story that we've still got going on is the fallout from COP29. This is over in Baku, Azerbaijan, one of the most oil-rich nations in the world. The leader of Azerbaijan got up yesterday at the COP29 conference to say that basically oil was a gift from God, and that we should really be very, very grateful for it, which didn't please the climate nutters.
No.
But have a look at Keir Starmer. He made a statement yesterday on what he was going to do about energy in this country.
I accept it's difficult target. It's an achievable target, but it's not about telling people how to live their lives. I'm not interested in that. I am interested in making sure that their energy bills are stable, that we've got energy independence, and that we also, along the way, pick up the next generation of jobs, which will be measured across the United Kingdom, good, well-paid jobs in every community. I'm very interested in that.
So he's very interested in cutting emissions by 81%, right? Which is, by all accounts, a ridiculously, unbelievably impossible target. By 2035 he wants to do this, which is only really 10 years away, right? Keir Starmer has gone to Azerbaijan, one of the few leaders who's gone there. Most of them haven't gone there. I made a lot of fun yesterday of the fact that the Taliban have also gone, and who knows what they were doing there. But, you know, he says he's not going to affect the way that anybody lives. However, people who know about these things say we can't achieve an 81% cut to emissions unless we rule out eating meat, unless we rule out eating dairy products, and unless we stop travelling as much.
Well, I won't be doing any of those things.
No, I'm going to be travelling plenty, thanks. I'll be eating plenty of red meat. And I love my cheese. And I'll be putting milk in my coffee, if that's all right with the police.
No, and I think this comes... the key point to make here is that the UK does a great deal when it comes to environmental protection and sustainability.
Well, I had an argument yesterday with some bozo who was out there, you know, for some organisation, and I said, hang on, we are the only country that has reduced its carbon footprint by 42%, which he eventually had to agree with. So we're leading the way already. But it's not making any difference, because if it was making any difference, why would the climate not be now controllable?
No, absolutely. And I think that what we need to talk about here is industrialisation of countries such as China and India.
Yeah, right.
No, that's a key point to make here. And I think in terms of the UK, if you look at the UK's ranking on the Environmental Performance Index, it's the highest ranking, one of the highest ranking countries in the entire world. So I think that the UK, how much more can it truly do on this front without significant international cooperation?
Yeah, exactly right. The front page of the Times today has got Keir Starmer's pledge to cut carbon emissions by at least 81%. However, it's not possible to do it unless we travel less, we eat less meat and less dairy. Unbelievable. So the recommendation was based on a report published in 2020 on how the UK could achieve a radical emissions cut. I mean, it's like everybody's looking at this thing and not realising what's going on. It's like
absolutely, and I think much of our environmental...
There's no sense to any of it,
I think much of our environmental politics is not rooted in reality.
No.
No, I'd say that I'm very... I'm very keen to see a more environmentally friendly country, but it needs to be done in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
And it has to be done in a way that doesn't work against working class interests.
Of course.
Time and again.
Yeah.
And I think another point is that
but
when
also
you look...
we have to, do we not have to be convinced exactly what net zero actually means?
Well,
if net zero is to be achieved, what happens if we
And I'd also make the point, a lot of these goals surrounding the net zero transition, we don't have the social infrastructure to keep up with it. If you don't have the social infrastructure in place to meet those goals, then those goals are not realistic to begin with.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's have a look at Ed Miliband, talking of goals, because you might remember before the election, they were full of the joys of spring about how we're going to save you 300 quid, right? Your bill is going to come down by 300 quid. Then it sort of got to the point where he went, well, over what period? Oh, well, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Well, there's great talk about Great British Energy as well.
Great British Energy. We're not really sure, but, you know, you'd definitely be better off. Of course, we're worse off now. Let's have a look at Ed Miliband on Good Morning Britain yesterday.
We set that out for 2030. It was an independent set of modelling that said that bills could go down by up to £300. And what's important, Susanna, is that the report I referred to last week from the energy system operator confirms that not only is our target achievable, but it will lead to lower costs of electricity. And this is really, really important. It is the big change that I was talking to Richard about. It's a change that renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels. And what's crucial also is it's not just cheaper, but it gives us more security.
Okay,
because what we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine was prices going through the roof.
Yes.
And that is what cheap, clean renewables avoid happening.
This is the thing. It's gone from, you're going to be better, £300 better off, right? They didn't give a time frame. So now, in 6 years' time, you could be better off because we've got this model here that shows us that if we tap in some numbers to it, it says, oh, in 6 years' time, you might save 300 quid. You might. There's nothing to it. It's like paper thin.
No,
They're
absolutely.
treating us like absolute idiots.
If we're really serious about bringing down energy bills, then we have to invest more in nuclear. I don't see much of that at all. Actually, I think there's
or get stuck into some fracking or something.
No, absolutely. But there's a general scepticism towards nuclear energy, and I think that is the key to unlocking cheaper energy bills over time.
Totally, absolutely right.